Welcome to Arts First, the podcast dedicated to promoting freedom of expression in the arts and art for art's sake. A few years ago, Wendy interviewed playwright David Ireland for an Arts and Society Forum event during the COVID lockdown. They talked about his work, his inspiration, and his approach to script writing. From a Northern Irish Protestant background, he's used to being on the wrong side of the mainstream. He seems to have a knack for capturing or seeing how working class people who find themselves on the wrong side of history, especially men, how they deal with difficult or conflicting situations, and sometimes in very anarchic or extreme ways. And he writes brilliantly and hilariously about psychological tensions generated by being caught up in real life difficulties. His plays include Cypress Avenue, Not Now, Yes, So I Said Yes, and Ulster American. His latest play, recently performed in Scotland, The Fifth Step, may not be brought to a theatre near you, not least because it challenges Alcoholics Anonymous and their line on alcoholism. But we've got a friend who went to see it with her 2 adult children, and they agreed to come and talk to us about it. So we give you Linda Murdoch, her son Daniel, and daughter Megan, who saw The Fifth Step at the Pavilion Theatre in Glasgow at the end of August.
Myself, Daniel and Megan went to see The Fifth Step in Glasgow, and it was part of a run in Scottish theatres. I think it was at the festival, Edinburgh Festival, and also I think it was in Dundee, if I remember. It was packed. It was a very busy performance. It was the first performance of the Glasgow run, which was over 4 nights, I believe, 3 or 4 nights. I loved it. It was great. It was about 2 alcoholics, the relationship between the 2 alcoholics, an older one and a younger one, both of whom were in the AA. And the older one eventually sponsors the younger one in the AA, becomes his mentor, if you like, along AA lines. And I think that the play was really about the change in their relationship over the course of the 5th step of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is, I don't know if you know, but they do 12 steps, and this was the 5th step, and this is the confessional step, where you admit to someone you trust all the bad things you've done, and the idea is that if you do that, then you'll begin to feel better and get better. So it was really about the play itself was about how that relationship changed and the power dynamics in it, how they were altered, throughout the narrative and the conversation. Yeah, it was really good. So don't know what you 2 thought of it.
Yeah, just going back to when you talked about the 2 main characters, Luca and James, and their kind of power dynamic. It says here in the programme that Jack Lowden's character, Luca, is 30-something, while Sean Gilder's, James's character, is in his late 50s. For me personally, it felt as though Luca's character was a lot younger, maybe around my age, 22, or maybe even younger, because he felt like a very awkward teenager. And for me, it would be hard to accept that a 30-year-old would kind of be able to relate to the character of Luca. And I think kind of overruling David Ireland's, his law that he's put in place about their ages, I think if you actually see Luca as a younger character, it makes the play a lot more hard-hitting, and the power dynamic is a lot more played into. So that was kind of the first critique I had of the play, was that Luca's character didn't seem very plausible to me.
Yeah, I can see where that's coming from. But I also think it was also quite clever, because I know in terms of stuff like alcoholism and drug addiction, people tend to not act their age. So a lot of the time with these types of addictions, it does stunt like brain development, I think. So I think if that was actually a theatrical decision, or if it was just a happy accident, I can kind of see the connection between how he looks and acts younger than he was, because I forgot he was actually 30-something. I thought he would have been like late 20s. But now that Dan said that, kind of piecing it together, it might be a choice.
I think it was very interesting that, to me, the character of Lucas' age is kind of ambiguous, because I felt he was very relatable for a lot of young men. He's very Andrew Tate, I'd put it. He has this talk about how at the start of the play how he thinks he's an incel, and he's very sexually frustrated, and he watches a lot of pornography. And I think he mentioned something along the lines of how he had an interaction with a woman and he couldn't concentrate on the conversation. He just kept staring at her breasts. And then he kind of goes on this awakening and he starts to do all this self-improvement. And that felt very relevant because of all this kind of toxic masculinity and Andrew Tate. Yeah, so I thought that was very fitting.
I thought that the Luca character was much younger. He was very kind of like a working class, west of Scotland, young man, just wanting to shag women all the time, and he kept saying it, and he just couldn't, the James character was quite embarrassed by the fact that Luca said that he masturbated 40 times a day. So yeah, I get what you're saying there, Dan, that he did come across a bit of. But by the same token, though, there is an idea out there that young men find it hard to grow up. So he may well have been in his early 30s, as Megan says, but it's, he's never had the opportunities to test himself in the real world, or maybe he's told because of his toxic masculinity that he shouldn't be out there and he shouldn't be anywhere near women, So I just think that that was quite ambiguous. I hadn't thought about the Andrew Tate relationship, and that seems quite pertinent, really. I mean, I thought that it was. I liked it. It was really refreshing, actually, and it was refreshing because it was in some ways it was quite old fashioned. It was about maleness, talking about stuff like that. It was very kind of old working class west of Scotland. And it was almost a bit of a relief in the audience that you could laugh at these things again. You could laugh at that whole "don't take yourself too seriously, son." Don't get above yourself, because it's been such a long time since we've been able to do that, because it was very, very unwoke. I don't know if you two felt that, because you've seen more plays than me, more recent plays than me.
Yeah, like with a lot of David Ireland's plays, it was very humorous. Although it was dark humor, it was very funny. And it was very refreshing. There wasn't kind of this, I don't want to say wokeness, but there wasn't that kind of wokeness about it. It was very gritty, like very, as you say, working class men. Yeah, comparing it to other plays I've seen, I felt as though it was a lot more intimate. I don't think I've seen many plays with just two actors. So in that regard, it felt very intimate. And it felt like a hole in the wall, almost. I felt like we were a fly on the wall, sorry. We were kind of spying or eavesdropping on these two men in a situation that for men is very vulnerable. It must be quite hard to conjure what you think men must talk about in an AA meeting. I can't really fathom what men talk about in that kind of environment. So yeah, it was very refreshing in that regard.
He's kind of famous for throwing in red herrings and you never quite know what's coming next. And on the surface of it, a story about two alcoholics in Alcoholics Anonymous following the 12 steps sounds like it could be all about well-being and mental health and all of those kind of things that are very kind of the issues of today, if you like. But he doesn't seem the kind of playwright who would do that.
I haven't seen David Ireland's films. I mean, it was me that spotted it. I thought, well, that looks good. And I was interested in going to it because of Jack Lowden, because I've seen him in Slow Horses. And I didn't realise he was Scottish. So that's why I thought it'd be quite good. I think well-being was mentioned in the play. Dan and Meg will probably remind me, but it was like, they talked about like that well-being, like that well-being stuff. So it wasn't, they were laughing, kind of sending it up. So no, and it wasn't really about, I don't remember it being about overly mental health, well-being and all that kind of stuff. I think Dan's description is quite accurate. The fly in the wall intimacy was definitely a feature of it. I mean, I thought the power dynamic really changed, and it changed around the fact that Luca, who at the beginning seemed quite vulnerable and quite, a young man in a mess, and the other guy, his mentor, his sponsor, seemed quite strong and authoritative at the beginning, but the actual Luca grew I felt throughout the relationship and the conversation. And actually, he turned upside down the whole, all the kind of advice that had been given to him by James, the sponsor, because basically he did what the sponsor said he should do. And then the sponsor said to him, no, you shouldn't have done that, because Luca took things into his own hands, and he became an agent in trying to get better, find meaning in his life rather than alcohol. But he did it by leaving AA, and they didn't like that. So basically, James said to him, yeah, but alcoholism's an illness. In other words, only we can give you the cure. And Luca said, well, no, I've heard that it's not an illness. It's like everybody from my background is an alcoholic, so it's to do with social stuff. And, I'm doing all the things you told me to do, like, go to the gym, find God, meet women. And now you're telling me I shouldn't do it. So because he took agency and took things into his own hands, he grew, I feel, in integrity. And James's hypocrisy began to pop out.
Going back to how you said there was a switch in the two characters, it was very much an opposite parallel throughout the play between the two characters. And I think eventually Luca almost became James's sponsor. Luca leaves AA, and then he begins to kind of find meaning and begin to kind of live a normal life. And that's when James becomes hostile towards him. He says, look, you can become better, but as long as you do it on my terms. And it seems as though James's downfall was actually remaining in AA. I forget how long he says he's sober, maybe 10 years, but him remaining in AA kind of allows him to interact with people that aren't very good for him, or that he can kind of manipulate and do things to.
Yeah, I also saw the switch between the two characters. It talked a lot, because I know it was the 12-step process, but they mentioned, the 13th step, which regarded how James took advantage of one of his sponsors, like one of his younger sponsors, more vulnerable sponsors. Then it was revealed that he's done this to multiple young women. And I think definitely it started to kind of unveil how James was just like a serial control freak. Remaining in AA, like Dan said, was just like a kind of hunting ground for him. All these people, all these vulnerable people were just in his reach, and he could just get his kicks off of manipulating them and doing what he liked with them. And I think maybe Luca was the kind of breaking of the cycle, I guess, because you could see how James was so frustrated with how he couldn't quite keep Luca under his thumb.
There was quite a lot. There was a bit of surrealism in it. There was reference to William Dafoe as God in the gym, to the giant bunny. Do you remember the giant bunny?
Yeah.
The Donnie Darko moment.
Yeah, I quite like that, because it to me, the whole set, so the way the set revolved around, characters moved outside of the set when it was going around, when it was changing. There was even a point where Lucas started like pulling out the panels, or like kicking down the panels of one of the rooms, leading it into the other room. And there was also the giant rabbit sequence, and him taking the rabbit costume off. And to me, it kind of felt as if, like, as Dan said, fly on the wall, we are seeing what Luca is seeing. Because there was a bit where the set's changing, and it's just after he tells James that he's found God, and the scene's changing, and he's just kind of dancing around the set as it's changing, not on the set, like outside of it, and then jumping over like around the poles and everything. I thought, okay, this is perhaps we're meant to look at it from Luca's perspective. It's like inside his mind, how he sees this 12-step progressing.
So you mean he was pulling the walls away of his mind for us to be able to see what he sees?
Yeah, like, but that was like right in the middle. I'm talking about like the whole thing. I think the whole thing was just, and it was Luca was able to manipulate the set. So I feel like it's very much this is Luca's mind's eye.
That makes the surreal stuff make more sense, because if you don't take that point of view, then it doesn't make much sense to me. But the way I think that you've explained it makes it more, it fits in. The surreal moments actually fit, whereas before I didn't think that they actually did. I don't know if Meg and Dan have watched Slow Horses with Gary Oldman and Anyway, it's on TV, and it's Jack Lowden's like one of the agents who's made a complete mess of his job as a spy, and so he's sent to work with Gary Oldman, and he's very, very good in it. I mean, and he was great in the play, there's no doubt about it. He played that kind of young man, a bit vulnerable, but quite that kind of working class, I want to do something and like life's not letting me kind of thing, and he personified that quite well, I thought. I mean, at the end, I was quite surprised that he after the play finished, he did a speech. It was because I think the Scottish government has cancelled some of the funding to Creative Scotland because they're skint. I think I did clap eventually, but I was a bit taken aback because Creative Scotland is known in circles in Scotland as just completely trans-captured. And it's ruined the lives of many real artists, like the poet Jenny Lindsay. So when he did that, I thought, maybe he's just another one of these lovies, like David Tennant.
Just going back to the performances, I kind of have to disagree with you there, Mom. I actually thought Sean Gilder was actually the star of the show. Although Jack, it was on character and it was mannered at the start. For me, this kind of young, jittery man-child, it kind of got a bit irritating and tiring. So that's why I was really pleased when he kind of had that change of character towards the end of the play. But yeah, I thought Sean was much more kind of nuanced, much more layered. I thought his character unraveled quite well throughout the play, and we began to learn things about him more. And you could kind of, when you first meet the character of Sean, you see this man who's kind of got his life together. When you compare him to when you meet the character of James, you see this man who's kind of got this life together. When you compare him to the character of Luca, but you could kind of tell there's something there, and as this play progresses, it unravels and you learn more about the character, so I thought Sean in that regard was, for me, the star.
One of the things I think that I really like about David Ireland's plays, and I've seen 2 or 3 of them, is there's something that I think is very honest, or what he is trying to do is get, and why I think people like him, is he's trying to kind of get below the surface of the public appearances, what people put up. His characters are not necessarily people who would open themselves up in public, but in that sort of, fly on the wall setup, you go beyond the barrier of what people appear to be and to what they're really thinking. And that's where the kind of a sort of sense of relief perhaps is. You feel like you're seeing true people who at they don't necessarily intend to be true to themselves, but they are true in, who they are on the stage. And so I was very interested in what Dan just said about the James character, because one of the things you said earlier was it sounded like he turned into a complete monster at the end, or didn't turn into, but became clear. It turned out he was a complete monster. So I just wondered if that was what happened and how the nuance continued. I think David Ireland's characters can be very extreme, but they're 3-dimensional.
Yeah, despite the attitude towards James's character at the end, it was still very cathartic, I think. Kind of seeing someone who you think has it all together, but is actually not a very nice person and is kind of consumed by his self-interest. So once again, kind of David Ireland's play is very cathartic and very relatable, I think, especially for men.
In the end, he became really, really, really horrible. The only line that anybody in the audience drew kind of like, that kind of horror was when Luca basically told him that his son was gay. After James going on, being gay is fine. It's absolutely fine, kind of, there's nothing wrong with it, because at the beginning, Luca was worried that he might be gay. I'm not gay. And, but then he discovers that he may well be gay because he was approached by James's son, and they got off with each other. And when James finds out, he goes absolutely mental and basically says to Luca, you said that your dad used to beat your mum up, and he beat your mum up when she was pregnant with you. Well, I wish she'd had an abortion. And, the audience went like that. And he just showed how his true character, as Dan was saying. I'm definitely going to go and see some more of his stuff. I mean, I really liked it. It was really, really good.
Thank you for listening to Arts First. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions and your support, and we hope you're enjoying the podcast. We've got some great shows coming up between now and the end of the year. And if you haven't already subscribed, then you can do so on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, SoundCloud. We're on all of those. Please give us a like or a rating where relevant. And of course, a review would be really appreciated. Thank you very much.